Little backstory, my aunt has always had a greedy streak ever since I was a kid. She is the type of person that will yell at a store employee because something that was advertised isn't in stock or not at that particular store or not on sale and has been banned from entering multiple stores. When my grandmother was on her deathbed, my aunt had talked her way into getting my grandmother to sign her on as an executor of the will and ended up taking everything and anything that had the most value. Fast forward. My uncle was my best friend. I always looked up to him as a kid. He was a truck driver, so he would be gone for a long time, and I remember one summer he even took me with him on the road. But sadly my uncle had cancer, and while he was in the hospital my aunt had tried to get him to assign her as an executor of his will, but since he was quick to pick up on what happened when my grandmother passed away, he hired a professional estate lawyer that would take care of everything. If you can imagine, my aunt was not very happy and was quick to throw out a sob story of how offended she was that her brother couldn't entrust her with an important task. This went on for 2 weeks. Even on his last day in hospice, she still brought it up, and was asked to leave by nurses. He passed away peacefully in 2011. Now I didn't know it at the time, but I quickly found out why my aunt was, so we were all asked to gather at my mom's home where the estate lawyer came to tell us who was getting what. So finally my time came on the list and I was surprised to have anything willed to me. What did my uncle will to me? Why, his rig and car, of course. My uncle's rig is a 2008 Lone Star International which was fully loaded. My uncle's car is a 1966 Chevelle SS. My first thought was, what in the hell am I going to do with a big rig? My aunt's first thought? Well, she didn't have a first thought. She just screamed and cussed at the lawyer, saying that I was too sick to have those things and didn't deserve them because I was his nephew and not his sister. The lawyer asked her to sit down and he would get to her. When my aunt sat down, she looked at me and said, "You're giving me the title to both of those," to which I laughed and said, "In your dreams maybe." The lawyer kept going down the list, and because my uncle was a legend, he put my aunt at the bottom of the list and said, to quote, "To my sister I am leaving her my luckiest, most important dollar, because all present at this meeting will know she needs it most," and then was handed the dirtiest looking Canadian $1 coin which was sealed in a block of acrylic. Myself, my dad and my other uncles nearly wet ourselves laughing. My aunt, however, didn't find it that funny and instead went into another tirade on how this was unfair and saying she didn't have anything to hold on that was his. The day passed and then the nightmare began. My aunt would call over and over and over asking about the truck, wanting to buy the car, if I was going to sell the truck, if I was going to sell the car, all to which I said no. Things got worse when my aunt started saying that she wanted her car and she had someone that wanted to buy our truck. At this point I got extremely irritated and said, "It's not your car, it's my car, and my car is staying with me, and it's not our truck, it's my truck, and no one is buying it." A week later I woke up and heard something, so I went to investigate, and there was a tow truck in the driveway. I quickly told the tow truck driver, who was a friend of my aunt, that if he so much as put a hand on that Chevelle I would have him arrested for trespassing and grand theft, and then proceeded to call the police. Cops showed up and I told the police officer my side of the story. Then he went to my aunt and the conversation went like this: "Cop, ma'am, can you tell me, is this your car?" Aunt: "Yes it is. He just won't give it to me." Cop: "Ma'am, do you have the title of the vehicle?" Aunt: "No, I do not. He won't give that to me." Cop: "Well, ma'am, I looked at the registration and title of the vehicle and he is listed as the owner of the vehicle. That vehicle is legally not yours, and having it towed could land you and your friend prison time for auto theft." Aunt: "Well, I think I am the one who should get the car because he can't even take care of himself." Cop: "Ma'am, it doesn't matter what you think. What matters is legal ownership, which you do not have." A week later my aunt had attempted to take me to court for the car, which the case wasn't even put before a judge. My aunt refiled the claim again. It went to court, and once I provided a copy of the will, title, and registration, the judgment went in my favor and my aunt was forced to pay my court costs after dismissing my aunt's claims with prejudice, meaning she can never file that lawsuit again. Then tragedy struck again. This time a great uncle passed away. I was on the will. Again. Can you guess what was left to me? A new car. My great uncle's 1967 Chevrolet Impala SS, which he restored himself. My great aunt, his widow, was thrilled that I got it, but the mood was quickly soured when she realized that my entitled aunt, her niece, really was not thrilled that I got it. This time she stepped it up a notch and skipped the screaming and complaining and instead went to scheming. 3 days after I took possession of the Impala, she rented not just one flatbed, but 2 flatbeds. She managed to get the Impala onto the flatbed and sped off, leaving her boyfriend behind attempting to get the Chevelle on his flatbed as quickly as he could while I stood by on the phone with police. Police quickly caught up with my aunt and arrested. Her boyfriend was arrested in my driveway and soiled himself in the process. Her and her boyfriend both were hit for 2 counts of motor vehicle theft. Both were charged and found guilty and sentenced to 2 years and 2 days in jail. End points. I haven't spoken to or heard from my aunt since she got out of prison, and I have no desire to. Before she was released from jail I filed a restraining order against her and it has stood since then, but the last I heard, she is still screaming at store employees, complaining about money and asking about me and the vehicles. I still am the owner of all 3 vehicles, the Chevelle, the Impala and the Lone Star International, and don't plan on selling any of them. I repair and build computers for a living, but more and more I have been getting into auto repair as a hobby. As I do live in Canada, I do not drive the Impala or Chevelle during winter months, but every year I always take my great aunt, who is now 96 years old, to A&W to get a burger, onion rings and an ice-cold root beer in the Impala, which is something my great uncle did for her since he got the Impala in 1970. A very good friend of my uncle's whom now owns a business actually rents the Lone Star International from me. He promised me that he would not get a single scratch or spot of rust on any single part of it, and to this day that Lone Star looks factory new and has been all over the world. The guy that rents the truck even continued doing a little tradition my uncle did, which was to get a decal on the truck of the state/Provence/territory flag of F to the places the truck has visited. It currently has 31 state decals and 3 province decals on it. My great aunt isn't in great health and she has told me that she put me in her will so that I will get her cars, which are 2 of my great uncle's first cars, originally left to her in the will, which are a 1958 Chevrolet Impala and 1957 Plymouth Belvedere Fury, which is my favorite car. I saw the movie Christine when I was 6 years old in 1996. Ever since I love the car, because she knows that I will take care of it and park it right beside the 67 Impala SS. I can already imagine the fallout that I'm going to get for that, so there may even be another post, though I really do hope there is not. Thank you for reading and I hope you have a great day/evening. Update 1. EA equals entitled Aunt GA equals great aunt. So I'm not really sure how this is actually done or if I'm doing this right. I looked everywhere and information is kind of limited, so we'll just jump to it. Quite a few things have changed. So to start, GA is doing much better medically and she is looking forward to her 97th birthday. I was actually inspired to make this update because I just recently took her for our usual A&W trip, which she loved. Her mind was also blown that now A&W sells frozen root beer, which had me laughing for about 15 minutes straight because she couldn't understand why someone would want a block of root beer. I had to order one and show her that it's like a icy or a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. Turns out before he passed away, my great uncle was working on restoring his 1958 Nash Metro, which I think is moderately terrifying because if you crash, that steering column is going to go right through you and you are going to go through whatever car you crash into, since that thing is a little tank. GA really doesn't want to hear about the Fury or the Nash anymore, so she gave me the title to the Fury. My cousin really wanted the Nash, which my aunt obliged him, and I'm not even disappointed because I think that thing is ugly as sin. EA found out about it and threw a fit. Was on her way to my house, but without me even knowing this took place, I was surprised to find out that my mom had actually called police and police had called her, EA, to tell her that if she set foot on my property then that would violate the protection order and she would be charged, and so she had best stop the car, turn around and head home. Well, she couldn't get the Plymouth Fury, but by golly she was going to try to get that Nash Metro. My cousin had called me and told me that she actually went to his house, under the pretense of a pleasant visit, and said that the visit went nicely for maybe an hour, and then suddenly the golem switch was flipped and she started listing off reasons as to why he needs to give her the Nash, such as, when she was little she would ride in the Nash, she deserved it, LOL, he wouldn't take care of it, also LOL because he has a 66 Pontiac GTO that I have been trying to buy off of him for 7 years. It would be much safer at her place, despite the fact that he lives about 20 miles from where I live in the middle of nowhere. All of these did not faze my cousin, and instead he told her to get out of his house after citing the reason of how it was kinda his dad's car. He had to deal with her pestering him for around 7 months, and then he finally just blocked any form of contact with her. She hasn't tried anything since. GA then went on to sell the farm, which upset EA even more because that's one more thing she can't have, and it is even in the will that my cousin and I retain the vehicles at all times, and now my cousin gets the house in town, which was changed from EA to my cousin, and so the dust is settled now and things are all good. Now some pretty good things have come out of this. So number 1 is when I found out that my mom was the one that called the police on my aunt. That led me to talk to my mom for the first time in 5 or 6 years, and now we are on speaking terms. I also have a much better relationship with my cousin since we were never really that close to each other to begin with, and he was blown away at the fact that I have a full-on machine shop on my property, so on weekends we will be in the shop talking, and he has been helping me with my project. My project is, I found a Lincoln Continental MK3, and ever since I was a kid it's been a dream to have the car from the movie. Well, the car. So we have started chopping the crap out of it and making everything by hand to get it looking perfect. The Impala, Chevelle and Lone Star are all doing great. The Lone Star had a bit of a hiccup and the entire transmission and engine needed to be replaced, but Lone Star actually said that the engine should have been replaced long ago, so that all got done and signed off on, along with a new hitch plate being installed on it. My uncle's friend still rents the Lone Star from me for his business, and he even got a custom decal put on the trailer for it of a chicken hawk. My uncle's nickname was Chicken Hawk, and now has 42 state decals on it, up from 31, and 6 provincial decals, up from 3. Me and my cousin both got invited to a car club because we were at a recent car show. A friend of ours had recent dealings with this car club. They gave him some of the money needed to restore a 1951 Studebaker Woody, and once the car was complete they actually had taken him to court to get the car, which now sits in their showroom. So me and my cousin asked them when our friend is going to get his Studebaker back, and then I said that I don't associate with people that have zero moral fiber. We are now working towards getting him his car back, since legally the people in the car club can't so much as sit in the car without our friend's permission. Since nothing was in writing, he has to pay the car club back, but won't get the car back until he has paid the car club because his lawyer was an idiot. Before I forget, EA has actually had to come out of retirement and now both her and her boyfriend are forced to go back to work since they ran out of money pretty quick. As it turns out, having multiple homes and going on vacation 2 and 3 times per year drains your bank account pretty darn quick. So yeah. That's about it. 5 a.m. so it's time to get to work. Hope everyone out there has a good day/evening and thank you for your time. Update 2. So I really never thought I would be touching this topic again but surprise. I am back. Fuck. My life. So let's just jump right into it. This time we only have 2 characters which will be entitled Aunt, EA and Uncle. Uncle, here we go. So for those who have seen the last post, I have recently gotten onto speaking terms with some more members of my mother's side of the family, one of which being my uncle. I do need to put a little backstory in here on my uncle before we begin. So my uncle was paying EA for a house she owned. They have a written agreement which is almost like a rent-to-own agreement, so my uncle has been paying EA an inflated sum of money for 3 years in total, of which when that sum hit $64,000 that was it. The house was then given to my uncle. I will say it again. This is in writing now. A few years ago my uncle got into a car accident which was by no means his fault. He was actually hit by a bus driver who was intoxicated at the time, and because of that he got a very large settlement. Because of that accident my uncle broke both of his legs, so he gave EA his bank card and she was using that to do things such as pay his bills and get groceries for him. Now here is where the problems begin. EA and my uncle got into an argument. She kicked him out of the house and refuses to refund him the money he gave her. I also looked at the numbers for the settlement my uncle got. Out of $977,000 by my count, only $125,000 was actually spent on him. So by my count my aunt has stolen a little over $1 million from my uncle, adding on the money given for the house which was never returned. I expected this, but I never in 1 million fucking lifetimes expected this amount. Like, this isn't slap on the wrist kind of money, this is big trouble, big bad kind of money. I am fucking livid. I haven't told my uncle yet because to be honest I don't know how the fuck to tell him. How the fuck do you tell your uncle, yeah, your sister stole $1 million from you? Also factor onto that my uncle is a recovering alcoholic. He still drinks here and there but he doesn't get blackout drunk like he used to, but he is working for a friend of mine who I told very directly, if you smell alcohol on him, send him home without pay, so I really don't want to tell him and have him go on a downward spiral. I honestly have no idea what to do. I know that I have to tell my uncle this, whether or not he chooses to pursue it. He won't have a choice because this isn't right. I will make him pursue it and I will give him my lawyer and pay for it. Do I even go to a lawyer for this? So, anyways, I just had to put this out there. It is kind of vague, for that I apologize, but for the time being this is all the information I have. Thanks for the read. We'll give another update when I get this bullshit sorted out, and have a nice day/evening. Update 3. So this is a pretty big update, buckle up. I really did not want to tell my uncle on the weekend of Thanksgiving, cause Canada, so I opted to wait till Monday since it was a long weekend. I got my lawyer at my place, I got my uncle at my place, sat my uncle down and I put what I found in front of him. He asked what it all meant, and so I had to tell him that the total sum of $977,000 plus is missing and is what EA stole from him. He broke down, couldn't comprehend why she did it. Aside from that I would say that he handled it fairly well and even he didn't know what to do, so my lawyer explained it. In Canada this goes down as financial abuse, and there is good reason for that. Since my uncle gave EA his bank card and PIN number in good faith, expecting that she would use it only for the purpose of paying his bills and getting him groceries, the fact that she withdrew money without him knowing is what brought that to light. Now, financial abuse in Canada is a federal crime. The fact that the money she took was a settlement? That makes it even worse. This is where it gets complicated. Because of the amount of money, this isn't a civil matter. My uncle agreed to take action, and so what we had to do is get not only the provincial government involved but also the federal government involved. One thing about agencies? Sometimes they work good together, sometimes not. We met up with representatives on Wednesday, 11th October, they explained how things would be done, what to expect. Yesterday, 12th October, EA and her boyfriend were arrested and charged. Both refused to speak without the presence of an attorney, which is their right. EA tried to call my uncle but wasn't allowed to, so she called my mom and tried to tell my mom that it was all bullshit. I was lying, my uncle was lying. She took care of my uncle, he never paid for the house, she never took anything. Went into detail as to how much of a burden I was on the Family Act. So they already had a warrant to search EA's house. They did find some of the money. The advisor told us that usually when people steal a large sum of money they do something called squirreling, where they will stash the money away in a mattress, under floorboards, in walls, door panels act. In this case they found upwards of $87,000 stashed in airplane carry-on bags. So far, at this time, keep in mind that they are still searching, but in order to do certain things, such as cut holes in floors and walls, they do need different warrants for that. All of EA's bank accounts have been frozen. They have people looking into every single transfer and transaction she ever made. They also flagged my cousin's bank accounts and her grandchildren's accounts. Pretty much anyone that got money from her. Their accounting for the last 5 years is going to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb and a microscope. The way my lawyer explained EA's situation is this: the more money they get back, the better it will be for her, but both her and her boyfriend are still in jail saying they didn't take shit, so maximum they are looking at 7 years in prison. Minimum 3 years in prison, plus they will have to pay reparations not only to my uncle but also the government, because the federal government most definitely will be charging her with some sort of fraud/tax evasion. Which I think is a fucking joke, because when I was 17 I was in prison, turned 18 in prison and got 2 years plus 287 days of probation, house arrest, for multiple assault charges, but that's just my opinion. 7 years for stealing almost $1 million is fuck all. I did make a statement detailing how this whole situation came about and how I found what I found, so that will be used in court, but at this point this is where my involvement ends. My uncle is doing okay. He is doing a few home improvement projects making shelves act. So I told him that if he wanted to use my shop he could, and he has taken me up on that offer, which is good because it keeps his mind off of the whole situation, and I have also noticed that he also doesn't drink as long as he is busy. I will try to keep this updated as best I can, but at this point it really is just a waiting game. EA's side of the family is, of course, defending her, so once again I have become public enemy number one, but my mom, uncles and especially my great aunt are not in her corner this time around. So for the end of this I just wanted to go through a little bit of a timeline just for a bit of a recap, and it will also fill in some holes. So 2018 was when my uncle had his accident. From 2018 to 2020 is when EA had access to his banking information. 2020 is when EA had also kicked my uncle out of the house he was renting from her in a written rent-to-own agreement. At the same time EA had also sold her house in the small town I grew up in, which was 3x larger than and in a much better area than the house she was renting to my uncle is. After that took place they didn't speak to each other for almost 2 years. Fast forward to 2023, my uncle wanted me to go over his funds just to get a head start and see if he could get any more money on his 2023 tax return, which is when I found out that around $825,000 was missing out of the settlement he got and around $100,000 was accounted for, which now leads us here. My final thoughts on the situation. I honestly do think that EA did plan this from start to finish, from selling her house to kicking my uncle out simply because she just wanted to take more, and that was the only way she saw where she could take more, and that left my uncle damn near homeless. Do I wish it happened this way? No, I don't, but I also think at the same time this needed to happen. Hopefully now EA will actually begin to understand what kind of harm materialism brings you all because of the fabricated perception of status it brings some people. Thank you for taking the time to read. Have a good day/evening.